Hello, hello. We've just got a few people joining us and we're going to hit live to Facebook as well. Perfect. We'll just let everybody join. Alrighty. Alrighty, perfect. So while everyone's joining, I'm just going to do a bit of a quick recap on last week's webinar. We heard from Brella, and one of the key insights that came out of last week's webinar was thinking about your virtual event platform as your virtual venue. So think inside your virtual venue, you have your delegates, your speakers and all of their profiles and information, your main stage and any breakout stages that you may have. You've also got your sponsor booths, so your exhibition space that are inside your virtual venue, meeting rooms for your delegates to connect with one another and also maybe connect with your sponsors as well. And you've also got your event programs. So you know how delegates come to our events and we hand them out the program or the run sheet for the day. They've got this beautiful virtual event program within the software. And the best thing about this is they can actually tailor it to exactly what they want to see and also schedule in the meetings that they've booked with any other sponsors and delegates. So that's just a quick recap. We've still got people joining. Hello guys, so great to see you on the line. So last week there were lots of screen sharing and I guess the presentation sort of got maybe a little bit technical in some parts. Today we're going to do things a little differently and have a fun and relaxed chat with Carson and Nigel. So as Nigel's presenting today, you're going to hear me talking as your host. So welcome to those who are joining us for the very first time in this webinar series, and welcome back to, of course, the beautiful people that have been tuning in for the last couple of weeks as well. So here's a quick overview on how we're going to roll. The session is going to be recorded and emailed to you. I'm going to be noting down key points from Carson and Nigel's conversation today, and we're going to shoot those key points out to you following the webinar, so you can just sit back, relax and enjoy our fun chat. We are going to cover the content first, and then at around 2:30 we'll dive into the Q&As. So if you do have a question that comes up during the session, like previous weeks, you've got a Q&A box down the middle of your Zoom window. Type your questions into the Q&A box. You can also vote on other people's questions if you really like what they've asked, and that'll bump it up and push it so that we get to them first. Please note that any questions you type in there will be seen by everybody else as well. And if you need any technical support or anything like that, of course, there's the comments box, and we've got Luke on the line helping us out with the technical side of things. So let me start by introducing Carson White. Now, some of you may have worked with Carson in his days at ICMI Speakers. Now, I loved working with Carson, so naturally when he started leading voice speaker management, I, like a total groupie, followed him. And basically, I guess Carson, in a nutshell, he's going to help you find the perfect speaker for your event. And that's so important, I guess now more than ever, that we're looking at running events virtually. So when I first had the idea for this webinar series, my first call, of course, was to Carson and Nigel, because life is way too short to work with people that you don't like. So Nigel as well, you've met on previous webinars, and as I've said before, he's pretty much the best MC I've ever worked with. So enough from me, we are going to get into it. I'm going to hand it over to Carson and Nigel. Hello guys.
Hi Kim, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that lovely intro and those kind words. But before we start, while we're doing the Mutual Admiration Society, I just wanted to also thank you for having myself and obviously Nigel over the last two and the next two webinars as well. It's a great initiative from you, Kim, so well done. Nigel, how are you?
I am very well, thank you very much.
Very good. Well, I think we get straight into it because we've got a bit to cover in the next 30 minutes. So I thought The best way to start this session would be to frame it up. And there are three key things that I want to frame up before we get into really answering those 5 questions that I put out there in the marketing material. So one of the things that I've been thinking about since this whole thing happened was that the virtual event stuff, and obviously specific to the program content. And one thing that really struck me the more I thought about it was that never before has the content that you curate and create been more relevant because you don't have all the other bells and whistles that you normally would put on in a live event. So we'll talk about a bit more about that obviously over the next 30 minutes. However, I do want to frame up straight from the start that it is important to understand that a lot of the skills and things that you will have garnered over the last few years in terms of curating speakers, selecting speakers, going through that process is still largely the same. So those skills and things that you've already had before are still very, very relevant. And the final thing I want to say that we're going to be mostly speaking about paid professional speakers and MCs today, although we will touch on the non-paid industry type speakers, which obviously form a vital part of any conference program. So, so that's my preamble, Nigel.
Which is beautiful. And look, I just want to jump in with the first question, I suppose, Carson, and that is, obviously we're going to be talking about professional speakers, MCs, and in-house ones as well. But why, in this environment, why are professional speakers and MCs in online events and hybrid events just as important, if not more important than they ever have been?
Well, actually, I want to start with using as an example of a virtual event that happened just last Thursday, an industry virtual event, the Meetings and Events Australia Evolve Conference. So some of you out there that are watching this may have actually participated in that. And from what I heard, I was unfortunately around, so I didn't get to participate, but I heard it was a hugely successful virtual event, and me as first attempt, obviously. So, so that was great. But the reason I wanted to highlight it was that there was delegate feedback, and in particular, there was some delegate feedback, which I found really interesting because this delegate feedback, I'll read it out to you and explain why. What I found the most beneficial was the Incredible Speakers program. All the sessions that I watched were engaging, relevant, honest, and thought-provoking. Now, that was from Shari Carr. She's the manager of global events at Helms Briscoe. Now, that delegate feedback could be the same delegate feedback for a live event, or in this case, it was for a virtual event. So once again, I'm using this as an example to really hammer home that your content, your program, your speakers, in a virtual setting are going to be absolutely fundamental in terms of actually getting that connection with your audience when you put your virtual program together. So, Nigel, you participated in the Evolve. Can you just quickly give a quick précis on what you talked about and how it went?
Yes, I did a session with a couple of other people, Paul and Nolan, and also a guy called Aaron Langer. And the premise that I put forward, and you said both words in your opening, is everyone's concerned about how do you engage people online. So how do you make sure people stay watching until the end? And the premise that I put forward was we've got to stop talking about engaging and we have to start talking about connecting. Because you can engage somebody for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but it doesn't mean they've connected with your content. It doesn't mean they've connected with you on a very authentic level. And engagement, and by engagement, we mean delivery. Connection requires content. Content has to be relevant. It has to be pertinent. There's a lot of technical aspects that help with that connection. And also as a presenter, how do you deliver through a camera in essence, and still connect with your audience? So we kind of spoke about how do you do that? And I think you're right. Evolve actually demonstrated that in many, many ways.
Yep, excellent. So that's a really good, sets us up for where we're going to go to in the next, 25 odd minutes. I think Kim, in her first webinar, summed it up really well. She said, your program and content is now your number one wow and greatest opportunity. So if we can stick that at the back of our minds as we go through what we're about to talk about, then I don't want to overcomplicate what we're really discussing here, because as I said, the fundamentals of a lot of this are still the same. However, virtual event is a different paradigm. So we do need to look at some other things. So, as I said, nothing will ever replace live events. I want to get that clear up front. We all love live events and conferences. So, the discussion around here is obviously in the basis that, yes, for the virtual and hybrid are going to be really where our reality is over the next 6 to 12 months. But I want to make it clear that hopefully live events will be back soon. But for now, they're gone. And so on that basis, we really need to then think, what is the only real wow that we can really give our delegates? And other than once you've selected the speaker, the tech platform that you're going to use, which Kim went through with Brella last week, and the AV side, which Andrew Delaney from Scene Change is going to talk about next week. The real wow that you have is the speaker program. So the speaker program, as we know, can be made a combination of paid professional speakers and largely industry speakers. Whether you're talking about the paid or the industry, some of the fundamental things still apply across both of those. So if you are going to, once you've selected your tech platform, one of the real benefits of having a professional speaker MC is that we all know that we do get tech issues, and issues with any kind of technical platform we use. So you need to be able to have a plan B, and actually a good part of a plan B is to have when you've got a paid professional speaker, but more importantly, a professional MC, hopefully facilitating a virtual event, you're able to cut back to them, or they're able to jump in if there are technical issues. So that's one of the key reasons to really engage, particularly a professional MC. Nigel, you actually had an experience when you were doing a virtual event a couple of months ago where you were Zoom bombed?
Yeah, which was really interesting. So, one of the roles of an MC, I think it's often like probably being a pilot, it's hours of sitting around in moments of panic, I was speaking at this particular online event. There would have been about 80 people on there, I think. And we got Zoom bombed. And doesn't happen now because Zoom, this is before they upgraded to version 5 or whatever. But if you don't know what a Zoom bomb is, without being too graphic, someone actually manages to get through the security and into the Zoom session and start posting up photos and saying whatever it is they want. It can be a little bit confronting. So you basically it's like having a gate crasher at a party, but in a much more sinister way. Anyway, so there's all these people on this call. I hadn't done my presentation yet. I was just sort of watching. But thankfully, the MC really, in a moment of complete crisis and stress, managed to stay calm and sort of get their head together and managed it really, really well, and basically got without knowing the technicalities, but managed to get everybody to disconnect and reconnect, and then everyone was filtered back into the session. If the MC wasn't there, it would have been complete pandemonium, because the organisers, although they know the conference and what's going on, aren't experts in how to work a crowd or an audience, be it online or otherwise, in those moments. And let's face it, if we're doing events, there are going to be, no matter how well you plan it, stuff goes wrong every so often. And you're absolutely right. So it was really nice to be just as part of the audience, I suppose, on that one, because it wasn't me that had to deal with it. But yeah, a good MC steps in when they need to. And it's that stability and that leveling in a professional way. And that's what they're trained to do. And it's really, really important. And in the virtual world, you're right, Carson, is technical glitches go on, lighting's not right, internet drops out in the middle of a presentation, and the MC is the key person that can step in and smooth those bumps over.
Exactly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Thanks, Nigel. And so some of the things, because we're in this digital space now and the virtual space, with your paid professional speakers and your MC, it's a good opportunity to have when you do engage one, have a conversation with them about what sort of promo video teasers they can do to promote your virtual event. What other resources, content can they share out prior to the virtual event on their session to help attract delegates and get people to the actual event. In terms of most professional speakers post-event will be able to provide you with some resources. So it might be a follow-up video again, thanks for coming to our virtual event. Here's some of the key points, or some resources, some information about book promos, or even sharing their slide decks. So they're just some basic things to think about when you are considering booking a professional speaker, but it just shows you how important it is to have a professional speaker MC. Over to you, Nigel.
Yeah, well, on that note, because there's because it's what I do, but there's a very big difference between presenting in a live room and presenting online. And with the advent of hybrid, those two worlds are coming together. So I don't book speakers, right? That's what you do, Carson. Well, you manage speakers, I should say. how do you select, or how do people select the right, how do you know your professional speaker or your MC can actually deliver the outcomes you want in an online environment? What do you need to look for to make sure that that can actually pull it off?
Okay, well, I guess going back to what I said right at the start, the preamble, is that the fundamentals in selecting your speaker, your professional speaker MC are largely the same. I mean, you know, with any conference program, you always start with, well, what are you wanting the audience to walk away? What are your key messages? What are your objectives? All of those kind of standard things you would do to put together in a normal conference program. You know, then you do your research, finding suitable speakers, get your short list, start the conversation with your speaker or MC. So a lot of that stuff is actually already the same. I guess, however, though, things have changed, as we know. And so some of the things that you probably need to really think about when you're looking at, you know, talking to your speakers is that a lot of the, well, not always a lot, but some of the content that a speaker delivers live may not always translate in a virtual environment, and the paid speaker should know what will and won't work in a virtual environment. So make sure that they are comfortable that the content and the presentation they've created for you will actually translate and connect with an audience in the online environment. The big one though is really, and this is something we'll probably talk a little bit on now, Nigel, is your speaker's ability to actually deliver down a camera lens. So that ability to actually connect with the audience down the camera. We all know, you know, speakers are great in a live environment, but as Nigel pointed out, the important thing is they've got to connect with your audience. So Nigel, you've created a virtual show reel. Do you want to talk just a little bit to that? We'll share this virtual show reel out after today's session, so you'll get a sense if you haven't actually seen Nigel's virtual show reel. But Nigel, just talk us a little bit about why you created that and what it's about.
Well, because there is a big difference between presenting live and presenting virtually. And a while ago, we did some research, and Carson, you were involved in this. And there's, you know, I guess one of the concerns out in, you know, when you're putting together an event is how do you know that your presenter, your speaker, your MC can actually work a camera? Because when you're working a live room, right, it's big and you're playing to a large space and you've got different people who you can see and bounce off. But when you're working a camera, it's almost intimate, you know, although it's a mass medium, you're actually presenting to one person, and that's the person at the other side of the camera who's watching on their screen. There might be 10,000 people watching, but if I'm one of those viewers, you're talking to me kind of thing. So it's a very different dynamic. And I used to teach a lot of that stuff. So the idea of putting together the show reel, I guess, was just to demonstrate that, you know, the camera presenting side doesn't scare me, and I've been doing it for 20 odd years. So it was proof of life, if you like. Yeah. And I think that's one of the keys is, you know, just because someone can work a live room doesn't mean they can work a camera. And so putting together the show reel was just a demonstration, if you like. It's more or less my new show reel of that particular environment.
Great. So if a speaker that you're talking to has done limited virtual presenting and they don't have a virtual show reel that like Nigel's created, you could ask them to actually just create do 5 minutes of their presentation as if they were doing it virtually online, and just get a sense of how they engage through the camera, you know, how their content comes across. So most speakers should be able to do a sample for you if they don't actually have the virtual show reel. One of the other things to really check in with your speaker is to make sure what's their studio setup like, what's their audio quality, what's their video quality, and confirm that it's all good at their end. Things like internet speed, do they have stable internet connection? I mean, they sound obvious, and particularly with non-paid industry speakers, these things become really relevant. A good professional speaker should have all this covered, but it will not hurt to ask these sort of questions. And one thing really to stress is the test, rehearse, test. So make sure that you pre-test all your speakers, pre-rehearse, not necessarily rehearse, you don't necessarily do the presentations, but test their equipment, make sure that everything's working. So I do initial tests, you know, maybe a week out from the event, and then a final test the day before, making sure that everything is still working really well. It won't eliminate an issue on the day, but at least you can go into the event knowing that you've done everything you can to make sure everything's working. Good professional speakers will leave nothing to chance. And so for them, you know, it's particularly important in a virtual environment that you get all these things right.
Sorry, on that note, Carson, that's a really good point, because you know, having grown up in the events world, we used to sit down and do a thing called the fatal flaws. What are the things that could go wrong? And that way you can kind of plan.
Yeah.
So it may sound a bit negative, but it's actually a very positive way of looking at things. So if you've done your rehearsals and you've ticked all the boxes, you're going to be prepared. If something does happen, it's not going to be like a complete surprise, because you've kind of covered it off by drilling, if you like. The other thing I just wanted to add is, I think the idea of checking a speaker's studio setup, their lighting, their audio, like I actually use a proper microphone, is really important. But also think about, and Andrew Delaney next week you mentioned from Scene Change. Scene Change now have really beautiful studio setups, and often for an MC, it's really good to bring them in-house to one of those studios. So you've got to make sure that your professional MC is familiar with the studio space and the tech crew that may be provided by, say, Scene Change or someone like that. Because not everyone's going to work from their own environment. We are now seeing pop-ups in various studios around the major cities.
Yeah, which is, I think, will become more the norm as we get more familiar with doing these sort of things. It's all about taking the fear out of running this, and that's what today's about. There are two effectively types of speaking in the virtual world. So there's the webinar style, which is what we're doing right now, which everyone's mostly familiar with. But the paid professional speakers, more and more of them now have got their own home studios and are doing what we call a true virtual keynote, which means they're standing up in front of the camera. They've probably got a PowerPoint to their left or right of them. They're actually going through, like, it's virtually like having them present live, but they're doing it in a studio environment. So, and there's I don't know if there's a right or wrong. I haven't seen enough of either to be swayed either way. But in an ideal world, I think a true virtual keynote scenario is probably going to work better than the webinar scenario for paid professional speakers. Other things to think about, is will, like in any previously, will they customize their presentations and specifically customize them to make sure that they do suit the webinar or virtual environment, which I mentioned earlier. Can they create some specific examples and for you with using modified slide decks, which are better suited to an online talk as opposed to a live environment. The Q&A session, the virtual thing allows for more interactivity. So do you do a Q&A during their keynote, or do you wait till the end? And some speakers might be happy to actually allow a Q&A while they're doing their talk. Others might prefer just to wait till the end and allow that Q&A session at the end. And again, having a professional facilitator at the end will certainly help with that process. And I think this is probably a really important one. And this goes back to, again, in a live environment, when you're selecting a speaker, can you work with them? So can you choose MCs and speakers that you not only can deliver in terms of your outcomes and objectives, can you actually work with them as people? Are they easy to work with? And how do they work? What are their work processes? Don't be afraid to say, well, how do you want your material delivered? What sort of information do I need to provide you as the MC or speaker leading into the event? Nigel, over to you.
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting one, because you kind of want to get the best out of your speaker and your presenter. So you want to accommodate them as much as you can. But don't forget, and I've got to be careful. Well, actually, I don't have to be careful saying this. At the end of the day, a speaker is really supporting your event and is one piece of the event. And they are not the event. So I think it's really important on that note, Carson, to be working with a presenter. And I hope I fall into this category, who's very pliable, who understands what you're trying to achieve, who understands the environment where we're all working in, and it's not all about them. And I think more and more as we move into this uncharted territory of the new normal and pivot and all those words that we don't like using, I reckon that's going to be more and more important. Carson, I just want to... Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to... You go, and I've got a question for you.
Oh, okay. Well, no, go for it, because I forgot what I was going to ask you.
So you touched on just before, Nigel, talking about how important that ability of the speaker to present, down the barrel of a camera. So yep. I just want to, I guess we mentioned, just touch on quickly the industry type speaker, the non-professional speaker, which a lot of the people watching this will have to book for their speaker programs. What are some of the, I guess, simple ways, ideas that they can connect when with their audience when they deliver their presentations?
Yeah, okay. How long have we got? Okay, quick list. I honestly believe the most important one is to get some camera training.
Yeah.
Not so much media training, because media training is often about how you answer questions without, and crisis management, the rest of it. But proper camera presenting, obviously a lot of executives and in-house presenters have had presenter training live on a stage, but it is different. So I would actually suggest allocate some funds in your budget, and we know budgets are tight, to train up your in-house presenters to work virtually, because it is a different dynamic. And make sure you've got someone who does that, who knows what they're doing. So that would be my number one port of call, actually, Cars. But there's a lot of other things to consider. And I suppose just a few of them. The internet speed you have mentioned already is really, really important. Decision about what is it you're trying to achieve in the first place. For example, is it going to be a live stream, or can you pre-record? Because if you can pre-record, often that takes a lot of the pressure off an in-house presenter. Yeah. Lighting is really, really important. So make sure that, they're lit adequately. The location, obviously, if you're doing a live stream, for example, or a virtual webinar to a board, you probably don't want to be doing it in a shopping center. So I know that sounds really simple, but we need to think about the context of what we're presenting and therefore the location that we're presenting it. Rehearsal is everything. In video, here's a really good point. Less is more. In live presenting, you can tend to rabble on a little bit. When you're presenting on video, it's really important to be more succinct and cut to the chase. And I think the advent of TED videos has really amplified that particularly. And the last thing is a good microphone. Audio is everything. In fact, people will switch off with bad audio before they will switch off with bad video. Yeah. So we're a little bit more forgiving vision-wise, but we're not forgiving audio. If the audio doesn't sound good, you're going to lose them straight up. So that was a long list. Not comprehensive, not by any means, not finished, but they're the key things that I would certainly think about.
Thanks. And just on that too, as Kim pointed out at the start, she's acting as a scribe for us today. So once she's scribed all these notes, we will add in some of these other points so when we send them out to you post this webinar. Nigel, you're an MC by trade as well as a speaker, as well as many other things. But what as a professional MC, what do you think are some of the most important things that, from a briefing point of view, that a client should really be thinking about when they engage you as an MC, or any MC for that matter?
Yeah, okay, couple of things. The first one, a lot of it falls onto me, but the first one is adequate and proper briefing. Often.
What do you mean by an adequate and proper briefing?
Okay, well, sometimes, and this is call it as it is. Sometimes, and you know this, Carson, you get booked for an event, you sort of have an initial chat with a client, and that's all you hear. And so you get to the event itself, and you don't really understand the nuances of the organization or what it is they're trying to achieve objective-wise. And so a really thorough briefing is paramount. And I've always worked on, just send me anything, tell me anything. The more I know, the better. And I may not use it, but it gives me a really big understanding. One of the biggest compliments you can get as an MC or a presenter is when people say, oh, we thought you were just part of the company. We didn't know you were professional. Yeah. And that's really good, because that means you've done your job and really understood the brief. So don't ever be scared of annoying your professional speakers and MCs and briefing the heck out of them, because the more you can brief them, the better. The second thing is early. Bring them in early and make sure they're a part of the process leading up to the event, especially with an MC, so they understand the crossovers, who else is involved. You just can't know too much. So get in early and brief thoroughly. How was that? Was that the right answer, mate?
Mate, that sounded that was what we had on the script, wasn't it?
It was, and we've only got a minute to go.
All right, so we're gonna wrap things up. So look, I guess again, just reiterating what Kim said right at the start in her webinar, first webinar, was that your MC is non-negotiable for a virtual event, particularly too when you, as you start to dabble in virtual events and try to get your head around how they all work. Having a paid professional MC who is very comfortable delivering in a virtual environment is going to be that another part of your team. So as I said, a good MC will work with you right from the start. Communication is everything. So, you know, don't feel like you're over communicating with your speaker or MC. If they've got all the information that they need, they will certainly let you know. And in terms of the documentation that you provide, particularly to your MC or facilitator, make sure that it's clear and concise run sheets. I mean, the script, the AVQs are all critically important, but you really need to make sure that the documentation you do provide to your speaker or particularly MC is actually going to make sense. So all the AVQs and the scripts and those things, because a lot of the time you will provide your MC with scripts. I'm conscious, Nigel, we should be wrapping up soon. So I guess the big thing really as we kind of wrap up before we go into questions is, you know, hopefully we've convinced you that you do need to hire a professional MC, a professional speaker to entertain, educate your delegates, motivate them, because as I said right at the start, it's your conference program, so your virtual online program that really is the sexy part of what you're going to be selling for your event. You don't have that ability to put in really cool networking events, gala dinners, breakfast, sponsor breakouts, whatever it might be, whatever you might put in a normal live event situation. In a virtual, you'll be able to do some of that in a virtual sense, but you don't have that, obviously, that live interaction. So what's really going to stand out? It's going to be your conference program. And how do you make a good conference program? A good conference program is made up with obviously some good industry speakers, but it's also going to be made up with, like any live event, good paid professional speakers, and of course your MC facilitator bringing it all together. Nigel, is there anything I've missed that you can think of?
No, I thank heavens Kim has been taking notes, because you've covered an enormous amount of material there. No, so I think you've covered all bases. I just want to reiterate, look, it's all about connecting. It's all about connecting, and if we can connect, then you're going to get the miles out of your events. You're going to get the return that you need.
Yep, absolutely. So. Yeah, so hopefully that hasn't fried your brain in the sense that this is all about just trying to simplify this process for you in creating your next virtual event, and hopefully you understand that your speaker program is really, really important.
Back to you, Kim.
Hey. Thank you so much, guys. I actually popped my video on because I was going to jump in there and have a chat when you were talking about briefing your MCs. But before I do, I just wanted to get everybody who's on the call just to have a look at the name you've dialed in as. For some reason, we've got around 7 people who have logged in as Luke Hesse. So if you don't mind just renaming yourself so we can know who you are when you're asking questions, and also we're going to do a quick poll in a second. So just in the top right hand side, if you can just rename yourself for us, that'd be awesome.
Wow.
So I know. Technical, don't you love it? And that's why we're here behind the scenes, making sure everything rolls like event managers do when we're at live events, right? So anyway, I did jump in. Now, what was I talking about? Briefing your MC. So Nigel and Carson, this question can probably, I guess, go to both of you. But as the event manager, when we're booking speakers and MCs, a lot of the time, particularly with MCs, they schedule the briefing maybe a week prior to the event. So I love what you were saying about send me as much information as possible, get me involved early, let's have a look at the program. Is that something that us as event managers should be leading and saying, no, you know what, I want my MC involved. I want to be able to send things to them. I don't want that brief the week beforehand, because us as event managers, like everybody on the line, I'm sure you know that week before an event is manic, and for you to try and schedule time is just crazy. So what's your advice for us around that?
Cask, can I jump in on that one?
Oh, you can, Nigel. Right then.
So I'm on your side with this, Kim. So for those who don't know, I grew up in events. So before I started speaking and emceeing, I was a creative director and ran a relatively large entertainment company, worked on a lot of gigs. And look, it's your event. So yeah, I would definitely push to get in early with your MC. And as an MC, it's kind of also more, a week is okay, but it's very close, you know. So the earlier the better. But look, if you're not happy with the situation, I would certainly, you know, you're in control. You need to drive when that meeting is. And I understand a good speaker and a good MC is busy, and there may be few windows of opportunity. I understand that, but try get as early as you possibly can. Sorry, Carson, over to you, because you've probably got a different view.
Oh, look, no, I'm on the same page as you, Nigel. But I guess the important thing is that, look, you know, in my world, the earlier you can book in your talent, your speaker, your MC facilitator, the quicker and earlier you can start a conversation. With some speakers, you might need to have much briefing at all. You'll have maybe initial phone chat and a follow-up chat. But certainly with your MC facilitator, you certainly need to be having conversations with them, particularly if you're doing a virtual event for the first time, or, you know, that you're really trying to understand this whole virtual events world. If your MC has been in virtual world before, they will be able to help you. So the quicker you get involved in the process, the better for you.
Do you reckon there's, sorry, Carson, do you reckon there's a bit of a sweet spot? Because I reckon if you brief too early, it's too far out of the event, and, you know, all that sort of stuff is going to be lost. So
Yeah.
Is there a sweet spot, do you reckon?
I think there probably is a sweet spot in terms of when you really need to pull everything together, but right up front, there could be even, you know, you may engage your MC facilitator before you actually engage your tech platform, because they may have advice on the best tech platform to use. So a paid MC should have really good knowledge of virtual presenting. You know, we've had plenty of time now to get our heads around how this all works and the platforms that are out there. So Brella obviously went through last week. So there might be initial conversation, then nothing, you know, till 3 or 4 weeks out when the script and run order started to be put together. And at that point, that's when you start to have a bit more of an engaging chat.
Perfect. All right, we've got a couple of questions for you guys. This is an interesting one. It seems to be the expectation now that speaker and MC fees should reduce when it's a virtual presentation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in with that one because pricing, we knew pricing would come up today, so that's why we probably, as a question, so we didn't actually bring it in our presentation. Look, my feeling is, after, again, giving a bit of thought after this all happened, was that, and I use this analogy, you'd probably pay $200 to go and see U2 live, if you like U2 or your favourite band live. But would you pay $200 to still have, to see U2 do a live virtual stream? My feeling is that most of us probably wouldn't want, because the reason is you're not getting the same live experience that you are standing there with, 10,000 or 100,000 other people experiencing you too. Not to say that a professional speaker is the same experience as a U2, but it's the same thought process, which is that, you know, when you book a live speaker, you're actually getting their ability to engage a live audience in that environment, not just their content, not just their who they are. So what happens is when you go to a virtual event, a virtual setting, you still get the speaker's content, you still get, you know, I guess, some of their energy and their passion and stuff that comes through a camera, but there's only a limited, that's only going to be a limited part of what they can deliver. So on that basis, Simone, my business partner, and I had a good chat, and largely we've reduced our virtual speaker fees by half. For any virtual event, and the logic was on that basis that you're not getting this exactly the same experience as you would get if they were live. And that goes back to my point right up front. We all want live events to come back, because live events is really where real magic happens. Virtual events, we can make magic happen, but it'll never replace a live event experience.
Can I jump in again with my events hat on, not my presenter hat on, because obviously the answer is as much as possible. Beware someone who's too cheap. Does that still apply, Carson? Because, you know, if someone comes, I'll do it for, $100, does that ring alarm bells of the quality of that presenter, or does that still apply? Because in live events before COVID, you know, if there was an MC who was cheap or a speaker who was cheap, there's probably a good reason for it, right? Does that still apply?
Yeah, look, one of the things I want to make clear too, when I said that, you know, our fees are generally half they would be in a live experience. If it's an MC facilitator that's putting a lot of work, you know, and that's discussed in the initial before the MC facilitator's booked, it may not necessarily be it's not going to be a half fee for that MC facilitator, because they're going to do a lot more work than they would normally do in a virtual setting. In terms of a speaker that is offering it really, really cheap, to me, it always comes back to, if that speaker actually is going to deliver what you want, and you are 100% comfortable they're going to deliver what you want in a virtual setting, then if you're getting them at a cheap rate, well, then that's fine. But what we don't want to do is certainly undermine and undervalue paid professional speakers and everything they bring to the table, particularly in a virtual setting. So look, the pricing thing is all very new in our industry, and the prices have been jumping around a bit. But fundamentally, to answer that question before, it's very few speakers are going to be charging the same fee to deliver a keynote in a virtual sense as opposed to the live experience.
I want to add to this. Okay, so after half an hour on this virtual webinar, you should pay your MCs an absolute crap load, because this is stressful. No, seriously,
in the mail.
Far out. Event managers who are on the line, you do not want to facilitate a virtual event. I'm here looking at technical stuff. I'm answering the Q&A, trying to make sure that people's know. And then I'm trying to scribe, sorry guys, I'm going to go back and look at the recording and get all of the notes. Like, Nigel, I don't know how you do this, Matt. Like, I don't know. I need to go have a drink or something. So event managers, don't even try.
Well, that's the secret. Yeah, if you look at my rider, there's a couple of bottles of scotch on there that have to be delivered before the event starts.
Oh,
you're making an interesting point.
There's not, by the way. That is a joke, just in case anyone's wondering.
Yeah. Oh. But you do make a point, Kim, that the MC facilitator is probably going to work harder, in this space than they would potentially like. So in terms of pricing, I mean, I know it's probably a bit, it's not the answer some people are looking for, but often the pricing might be going forward that we need to price it based on what they're actually going to do and deliver. If it's a very basic event compared to an awards night with 65 awards and it's in a full studio setup, that they're different. So the pricing will reflect really what they're required to do.
Yeah.
On that note.
Yeah, go.
Years ago, and Carson, you probably remember this, but years ago I put on my webpage, Nigel's done a good job facilitating if it looks like he hasn't done anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought that made sense. And our inquiries dropped. But the point is, being an MC is a bit like being a duck on the water. It looks all serene on the surface, but underneath you are pedaling like buggery. And you're absolutely right. A good MC can make it look seamless as if they're just standing around. But let me tell you, they're constantly, it's draining at times. Yeah. So thank you. That's a huge accolade.
No worries. People say my job's stressful. I have a new appreciation. I've gone all red in the face too. Far out. All right. We have a few more comments. Let me continue my role as facilitator. Nowadays, how do MCs encourage delegate networking in a virtual environment?
Carson, do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, will you do it? Yep.
Yeah. Well, first, it depends on the virtual environment, if it's Zoom or another platform, because that would determine the tools at your disposal. Secondly, it depends on what your objective is. But look, the simple answer is on something like a Zoom platform, and I presume we're talking networking, not interaction, because they're kind of different.
Yeah, encourage delegate networking. Yeah,
so networking. So Zoom has Zoom rooms, which is really cool. So what you can do is actually, create and this is another reason to get your MC involved early, because you can work out the structure of these things. So Zoom rooms, if you haven't used it, you can actually, like on this particular webinar, if we had, say, 80 people or whatever, we can take 20 people and put them into different rooms and prompt them with questions or have different facilitators to actually get them talking virtually. That's a bit different than interacting, because interacting, you've got hands up, you've got polls, you've got question and answers. A good MC will also instigate conversations on the chat room or on the chat board, simply by the questions they ask as well. And that comes down again to structuring. Once you step outside of Zoom, and you can actually use Zoom across a number of platforms, there's some really interesting virtual facilitation platforms. Two of them that spring to mind are Mirror, which is an Atlassian platform, and Mural. And what they are, you know, when you do a facilitation and there's a wall full of Post-it notes, this is like online Post-it notes. And so everyone can go in there and they can start adding their Post-it notes. So if you're doing a hackathon or a brainstorm, or you're doing a strategy session or something, or you just want to get general feedback from a session, what you can do is take everybody into a mural panel, and they can all be allocated different colored Post-it notes. And so you can get really complicated with things like that. So there are a number of ways. It comes down to the planning, because if you don't plan it, it ain't going to work.
I guess that's why it's important to lock in that MC early, right? So that we can be discussing this with you, because as event managers, we need to pull the resources and get experts in to help us put together a program that's going to, as we've been talking about, engage with people, you know, from behind the screen. Yeah.
And one of the pitfalls is, you know, the virtual medium tends to be a talking at medium, or people see it that way. But what COVID has done, there's an awful lot of platforms coming through that are two-way conversation based. So it's just a matter of getting a bit clever and thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. Actually, what we're going to do now, while I'm just filtering through a couple more questions, I'm going to pop a poll up on the screen for you guys. If anyone would love to chat to Carson about anything speaking, MCs, maybe training some of your internal staff to present to camera, jump online and answer the poll for us. If you'd love to have a chat, then we'll give you a call and go through a few more details for you. I'll just leave that up for a second. There was a comment from Peter, professional speakers are not the problem. It's industry speakers that tend to create problems. Yeah, look, absolutely, Peter. And as, you know, as the event manager too, I guess there's probably some nervous energy around that. Like, we put out our call for speakers and our call for papers, and we get maybe some technical people, some industry people who aren't used to presenting. So as the event managers, we now have to brief these guys and put out different briefing notes than we normally would. So it's really valuable, I think, maybe to be talking to people like Nigel, like Carson, to say, hey, how can we, you know, put together some really cool briefing notes for these guys and get it done early.
Yeah, and I think, Kim, it's up to, you know, the person putting on the virtual event to invest some time and effort into their industry speakers, their non-paid speakers, and find out, well, you know, have they done virtual before? Are they comfortable? What are their issues, concerns, and try and work through and make sure. So it's probably, I mean, even with a live event, you would still put time, you know, we'll try to put some time into your industry speakers to make sure their presentations were on the mark and relevant. One thing I want to make a point on with regards to industry speakers is sometimes, well, not sometimes, often less is more. So in the past, where you might have scheduled an industry speaker to do a 40-minute session in a live event, why not, you know, bring it back to a 20-minute session and take the pressure off the industry speaker to present that long in a virtual environment, because the longer you go, the harder it gets for them in a virtual environment. So don't be afraid to actually ask your speakers to present, cut back what they're going to present on, make it more specific, make it TEDx style talk.
And the other thing, again, and I did say it earlier, and Peter, you can't say this enough, get a speaker coach for a virtual environment. Because from experience, right, to bring someone up to speed, it's not a huge leap at times. It's fine. You know, there will be some bad habits that they're doing that you can get rid of, and there'll be some things you can add. And often having a coach is less evasive and less threatening. And, you know, we started to do a lot of that in the live world. You know, people used to book me to come to a conference and just, you know, be on the sidelines, talk to their presenters. Why not do that in the virtual world? I hadn't thought of that. It's a good idea.
Or not.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got another comment here from an anonymous attendee. Re the Networking, what they have done is organise smaller groups to meet for 30 minutes after the main session. So for example, they've sent samples for tasting and discussion, and they have table leaders who'll take questions from the table to be brought back into the main room. So my head around this is, yeah, absolutely. So that could happen in a live setting really easily, but also within a virtual setting. So you can then just create breakout rooms, have a leader per room where everybody sort of has a discussion, and then they could bring their findings back to the group through their main leaders. So we can still absolutely apply those kind of things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, that just comes down to planning. What questions do you want to ask? Or what, actually, before you even do that, what do you want those discussions to be about? What's the outcome you're wanting? It all comes down to planning.
Yeah.
Nothing new. Once again, nothing. These are all the skills that everyone listening will have.
That's it, Carson. I loved your comment at the start by saying basically we all have the skills already. We already know. It's just about, applying them in different areas. I kind of think virtual events, everyone's just going to go on, oh my gosh.
Yeah, which shouldn't be the case, Kim.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Nigel, Kathy has asked you, can you make a how-to video that we could share with industry speakers?
Yeah, it's on its way. It's seriously on it. So here's the deal. So I'm putting together a series pretty much. I used to work with a company called On Camera Connections. I used to teach this stuff. And I kind of, when I got busy as a speaker, put it behind me. But Kathy, absolutely, because the more we can get these people up, yes. Stand by.
Awesome. I can actually, see it working really well. So for your non-professional speakers, you could almost do a couple of sessions where say 10, 15, 20 of them join into a Zoom call and you can do the training possibly, with all of them.
And look, without getting too sidelined, here's the thing about it. Absolutely, yes. It's not that difficult to, like I said before, switch to camera. And if you've got good tech, you don't have to worry about that too much. So it doesn't take long to bring people up to speed. It's like golf, right? It's easy to start learning, really hard to master, but the initial steps are pretty easy. So stand by.
Awesome. And I've got a comment from Robin. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kim, Carson, and Nigel. Excellent session. Robin's sort of saying she likes to speak to her clients as a speaker several times throughout the process. It's all about relationship building. And she also agrees that fee is definitely an issue when you're hiring speakers because essentially in a virtual setting, they're creating the same outcomes as they would live on stage. And as you probably found out from this session, sometimes they're actually working a lot harder. So absolutely, Robin, agree with you. And it's going to be a challenge around fees for sure.
And we'll work that out as we go, by the way, because let's be honest about it. We're like you said it right at the very start of this series, Kim. And we'll get more inventive and we'll get better at adding value in doing this. So that I'm really optimistic that it's going to create, we're going to get better at this as we go. And that will, of course, be reflected in fees.
Well said.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Of course, some of us are perfect at it already, but most of us aren't. We're still tuning as we go.
Oh, I know. Exactly right. Another question, anonymous attendee. Should virtual keynotes be shorter in duration than what we would normally see at live events?
Look, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule with that. I think if that presenter is an excellent presenter and their content is great and it's highly relevant and your session, you want to put a 40-45 minute paid speaker in there, then go for it. But then at the same time, the TEDx style, we've seen that speakers doing 20 minutes can work. But my experience with paid professional speakers, they like to have, a minimum sort of 40-45 minutes because for two reasons. One, they have a heap of content that's hugely relevant and for the audience, and really, again, you're using a paid professional speaker to really bring your program to life. And the second thing is they know how to deliver and engage down that, they should know how to deliver and engage down that camera. So their ability to share that information in a way that an industry speaker is going to be better. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rule, but ideally, if you can, give your paid professional speakers the same amount of time in the live event.
And I agree. A good professional speaker will be able, because the question is, how do you keep connecting for 45 minutes? right, online. But a good professional speaker will be able to do that. They'll pivot, they'll turn, they'll have different delivery modes and devices. The other side of the coin, it's really hard to do a short 15-minute presentation.
Yeah.
It's that old Ernest Hemingway, I didn't have time to write a short letter. So, there's a number of nuances with that, but I agree with Carr. So a good speaker will be able to hold a virtual audience way longer than 45.
Yep. 45.
How about, how about Q&A? Because I see a lot of the time in live events where that professional speaker, your headline speaker, doesn't have an opportunity to do Q&A with the audience. I feel like in a virtual setting, it'd be really cool to have them hang around and have your MC interact with them, because people are more likely maybe to ask questions anonymously online. They don't have to raise their hand, have a microphone run out to them. So I feel like you could get some really interesting questions that may not necessarily be brought out in a live event.
Yeah, and I did make that point earlier that your Q&A is, being able to do that. One of the benefits of a virtual speaker versus the old live experience is that being able to have that facilitate that Q&A in the end in a more engaging way than you would. But I'd probably also suggest that the Q&A is done at the end if you're going to do a Q&A, unless a paid professional speaker really wants to enable that Q&A during the presentation.
And that would depend on the speaker.
Yeah.
And also if it's, again, it comes back to your objective, what you've done here, Kim, which is great. And you had me doing it on the previous sessions is look at the questions as they're coming up, because you get asked a heap of questions that kind of have the same thread. And so you need a moderator on the questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, you do. All right, I think we are through the questions, guys. I'm going to go have that drink soon. Wendy, I didn't read your comment and I'm going to. Thank you. I think that with MCs, it's a case you get what you pay for. A good MC will be worth the price. Absolutely. And I think...
Which is why I'm very cheap, because I'm not very good.
I should be the cheap one. Oh, this is funny. I hope you guys have enjoyed our casual chat today. If any other questions come up, please feel free to reach out to us. We're doing this to share the love, to help everybody sort of, sift through what the next steps are. Great session, guys. Well done. Happy birthday, Nigel. Yes, I saw that on my Facebook today.
Thanks very much. Kim's got me working on my birthday. What the heck's that about?
Oh, I know. So rude.
Oh, wait, look, when you're like me and you get over 30, they don't count anyway.
No, unless it's a COVID birthday. It's a time to celebrate more, I think, Nigel, isn't it?
A COVID birthday?
Yeah, well, a birthday during COVID, I reckon they're more important.
You know what I got, which it's never been I actually got socks for my birthday, and I'm really chuffed about it, because I've worn out all my socks being in COVID, because I've been walking around the office and the house in socks. They're all worn through. So for the first time in my life, I got socks for my birthday, and I'm really, really happy about it.
That's great.
Too much information.
Awesome. Well, on that note, maybe we'll wrap it up just before 3 o'clock. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Remember, reach out if there's anything we can do to help. And we look forward to catching you guys on next week's webinar, where we get very technical with Andrew from Scene Change. I can't wait to see it all. I'm sure we're all going to learn a thing or two. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thanks for having us, Kim.
Thanks, see you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.